Hello, I am Redbeard. Today, we peel back one of the darkest, most bone-chilling pages in human history. Close your eyes and imagine the biting cold of the vast, snow-capped Andes Mountains. The freezing silence of the air is broken by the silent screams of 300 children buried deep beneath the earth. Yes, you heard that right. Exactly 300 victims. This number is not just a statistic. It means 300 stolen lives, 300 unique stories of unimaginable pain. Today, we enter the world of the man known as the monster of the Andes, Pedro Alonso López. By his own confession, the killer of 300 young girls, he went down in history as the most evil, the most ruthless child killer of the 20th century. He was a ghost stalking his prey, a monster that slaughtered innocents in the most brutal way possible. If you appreciate these types of dark and true crime files, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. If you are ready, we begin the chilling journey into the birth of a monster and the continent's greatest nightmare. The story of a monster begins, not in a nightmare, but in the cruel reality of 1949. Tolima, Colombia. The heart of South America was bleeding, torn apart by economic ruin and endless political chaos. And in the middle of this fire was a woman who had run out of hope. Pedro's mother, a penniless sex worker, drowning in the impossible task of raising 13 children. There was no love in that home, only the heavy sound of blows and the silence of exhaustion. Violence was the only language Pedro ever learned. In 1957, a year that would mark the end of his humanity, at just 8 years old, the first seeds of darkness took root in his fractured mind. He attempted a horrific act, targeting his own younger sister. His mother's reaction was swift and permanent. He was cast out, thrown into the cold, into the unforgiving jaws of the streets. A child utterly alone in a world crawling with predators. He believed he found a savior when an old man offered him a hand. But that mercy was a direct descent into a living hell. Savagely mistreated, again and again, until he was left to rot in the ruins, discarded like human waste. The streets of Bogotá were cold, but the hearts of the men he met were colder. For a year, he lived like a ghost, eating from the garbage and sleeping in the shadows. But then, a flicker of light appeared. An American couple saw the starving boy. They showed him pity. They cleaned him, gave him new clothes, and enrolled him in a school. For 3 years, Pedro finally knew what it was to be full and to be safe. Until he was 12, inside an empty classroom, the one person meant to protect him became his predator. A teacher stole what was left of his innocence. The betrayal was the final blow to his soul. Pedro didn't just run away from that school, he ran away from humanity. He stole money and vanished back into the gutters, ready to become the nightmare that the world had forced him to live. The transition from the gutters to the iron bars was inevitable. By the age of 18, Pedro had become a master of the shadows, a professional thief who trusted no one. But even the most skilled ghost can be caught. A stolen car, a cold police station, and the heavy clang of a cell door. Pedro was sentenced to 7 years in prison. But for a boy who had already lived through hell, this was a new level of torment. Only 2 days into his sentence, the wolves smelled his weakness. 4 men cornered him in the darkness of the prison. They beat him until his face was a mask of blood, and they violated him repeatedly. But as he lay on that cold concrete floor, something inside Pedro didn't just break, it died. The victim was gone. In his place, a monster was born. He made a vow to himself, a promise that he would never be the prey again. In the shadows of the prison workshop, he crafted a weapon, a shard of steel honed to a lethal point. Within 2 weeks, 3 of his attackers were dead, slaughtered by the boy they thought they could break. The 4th man, paralyzed by pure terror, managed to escape the prison just to save his own life. The judge looked at the piles of bodies and called it self-defense, adding only 2 years to Pedro's sentence. They thought they were just keeping a thief off the streets. They didn't realize they were nurturing a predator. For 9 long years, he lived in a cage, rotting in his own hatred. He had never known the warmth of a woman, only the suffocating memory of his mother's blows. In his twisted mind, his mother became the face of every woman, and every woman became his target. 1978, the gates finally opened. Pedro Alonso López walked out into the world, but he wasn't looking for a new start. He was looking for blood. He began to wander, drifting toward the jagged peaks of the Andes Mountains, and soon the silence of the mountains would be broken by the screams of the innocent. 1978. The heavy iron gates of the prison finally creak open. Pedro Alonso López walks out into the blinding sunlight of freedom. But he is no longer human. He is a predator, with a soul forged in the fires of hatred and a hunger that can never be satisfied. He begins to drift, wandering across the rugged heart of South America. Eventually, he finds himself among the jagged, snow-shrouded peaks of the Andes Mountains in Peru. In these high, isolated altitudes, where the air is thin and the law is a distant memory, the monster finds his ideal hunting ground. He begins to stalk the indigenous tribes, the forgotten people of the mountains. According to his own chilling confessions, Pedro kidnapped and slaughtered nearly 100 young girls in these highlands. Because of the strained relationship between the Peruvian police and the mountain tribes, these disappearances were never officially recorded. The screams of those children were swallowed by the vast silence of the Andes. But the monster's luck was finally about to run out. In a remote village where the mountains keep their own grim secrets, Pedro is caught in the act while attempting to abduct a 9-year-old child. The tribe members do not wait for a judge. They do not wait for a jury. They corner the beast, exposing the predator to the cold air of unrelenting retribution. They subject him to severe consequences, making him feel the crushing weight of the agony he dealt to so many others. And finally, they prepare to deliver the final sentence. As the heat intensifies and the light is about to consume his wretched soul, a flicker of mercy appears from the shadows. An American missionary woman, who happened to be nearby, intervenes. She tells the villagers that God would not approve of such a killing and that they must hand him over to the authorities. The tribe listens, and the monster is delivered to a small, local police station. But the Peruvian legal system, disinterested in the problems of the indigenous people, chooses the path of negning. Instead of a trial, instead of justice, they simply escort him to the border. In 1980, Pedro Alonso López is deported, pushed into the waiting arms of Ecuador. A monster, discarded by one country, only to become the greatest nightmare another has ever known. In 1980, this ominous shadow enters Ecuador, drifting through the city of Ambato like a silent predatory presence. Almost immediately, a terrifying wave of unexplained absences begins to shake the region. Young children, some as young as 8, are lost to the unknown while walking to school or playing near their homes. But the authorities are unwilling to acknowledge the reality. They believe these souls were taken by organized syndicates or lost to clandestine networks across the border. They never imagined that a single man was monitoring their streets, targeting their daughters with a dark obsession that knew no bounds. April 1980, nature itself decides to scream the truth and reveal the horror buried beneath the surface. A catastrophic flood hits the Ambato region. Relentless rain triggers massive landslides, and the earth begins to vomit up its darkest secrets. As the mud settles and the waters recede, the residents of Ambato make a discovery that freezes their blood. 4 small bodies, decomposed, mangled, and discarded like trash, are washed up by the floodwaters. They were not victims of the storm. The forensic examinations reveal a much more brutal reality. These children had been violated and then strangled to death. The police finally realize this isn't a trafficking ring. This is the work of a serial killer. A monster is living among them, and he is just getting started. The predator's reign finally reaches its inevitable ending. The Ambato market was crowded, loud, and full of life. A mother was shopping with her 13-year-old daughter, Mary, when she felt a cold gaze following them. Suddenly, the man grabbed the girl and tried to vanish into the crowd. The mother's scream cut through the air like a sharp knife. The people in the market did not let him escape. They surrounded him, they tackled him, and the monster of the Andes was finally thrown into chains. Inside the interrogation room, Pedro Alonso López was a wall of silence. He stared at the detectives with dead eyes, refusing to speak. The police knew he was a killer, but they needed proof. They needed the truth. They decided to play a dangerous game, a psychological trap. They placed a priest, a man who secretly worked with the authorities, inside Pedro's cell. Slowly, the wolf began to talk to the man of God. What he confessed was beyond human comprehension. 110 victims in Ecuador, 100 in Colombia, and over 100 in Peru. A total of 300 innocent lives snuffed out by his bare hands. He looked at the priest and said, "I lost my innocence at 8. The world did terrible things to me, so I decided to do the same to them." He told them he only killed in the daylight because he wanted to see the terror in their eyes as they took their final breath. The detectives were stunned. They thought he was a liar or a madman seeking attention. But Pedro smiled and offered to lead them to the graves They traveled to the outskirts of Ambato, and as the shovels hit the dirt, the nightmare became a sickening reality. They found 53 bodies, 53 small girls, all between the ages of 8 and 12. The others had been swallowed by the floods or the mountain earth. The mask had finally fallen, and the world was looking at the face of pure evil. Pedro Alonso López stood before a judge in 1980, but there was no battle for justice. The trial ended quickly because the monster chose not to fight, confessing to every soul he had extinguished with a chilling lack of remorse. He was handed a life sentence, the harshest penalty Ecuador could provide at the time. For 18 years he sat in a solitary cell, a predator in a cage. Yet the system saw a reformed man where there was only a wolf in waiting. In 1998, the unthinkable happened. The man responsible for the deaths of 300 children was granted his freedom for good behavior. Outraged families screamed for blood, even putting a $25,000 price on his head, but López was a ghost once more. Rumors of his death surfaced, but they were silenced when he was captured again in Colombia a year later. After only 3 years in a psychiatric hospital, he was released yet again in 2002. Since that day, the trail has gone cold. Today, at 71, he could be an old man dying in obscurity, or he could be a shadow passing you on the street. If this descent into madness and the failure of justice has left you speechless, share your thoughts in the comments and hit that like button to support the channel. The Andes Mountains still hold the secrets of the lives he stole, but the greatest horror is that the world let him walk away. Pedro Alonso López is a reminder that sometimes the monsters we create are the ones we eventually set free. Sleep well tonight, if you can.